Think about the Indus Valley Civilization. I mean, it's one of the foundational ancient societies thriving over 5,000 years ago, right? Right there on the banks of the Indus River.
Yeah, amazing urban planning, sophisticated culture. It's quite something.
But it always makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much do we really grasp about their world, their perspective?
Absolutely. Archaeology gives us a tangible connection about, the cities, the artifacts, but to understand their mindset, their world as they experienced it, well, we need to explore different avenues.
And that's precisely what we're doing in this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to use a remarkable ancient text, the Rig Veda.
Mm-hmm.
We're using it as a window into the ancient geography, the people, and those crucial rivers of the Indian subcontinent, or Farat, as it was known.
Right.
Now, while it's revered as, spiritual scripture, we're also looking at the Rig Veda as a very old historical record.
Oh, record composed in hymns, yeah. Offering a unique glimpse into a landscape that has changed so dramatically over millennia. And to get our bearings, I think we need to address a long-standing idea that sometimes creates, well, a bit of confusion.
You mean the dating? That 1500 BCE figure for the Rig Veda?
Exactly that. For a long time, and you still see it cited sometimes, the Rig Veda was dated to around 1500 BCE.
Right.
And that was largely based on the work of the 19th century scholar Max Mueller. But interestingly, Mueller himself later acknowledged that this was speculative. It wasn't a definitive conclusion.
Right. It wasn't based on solid proof or anything. Yet that date seems to have really stuck in the popular understanding, hasn't it?
It has indeed. It really has. However, for our exploration today, the exact date isn't really our primary focus. We're diving into the geographical information within the Rig Veda, regardless of precisely when it was composed.
Okay, so how do we even begin to extract this ancient geography from such a vast text? Where do we look?
Well, we focus on a specific and really evocative hymn known as the Nadisukta.
Nadisukta?
Yeah, this is hymn number 75 within the 10th book, or mandala of the Rig Veda. You can think of a mandala as maybe like a chapter in a book, and a sukta as a specific hymn within that chapter.
Got it.
And the Nadisukta is powerful because it doesn't just name rivers, it actually praises them. It calls them divine mothers, the very sources of life for the ancient people.
Oh, wow.
It's attributed to the sage Rishi Sinanduki Priyameda.
Rishi Sinanduki Priyameda, quite a mouthful. So this hymn is like a geographical map, but encoded in poetry.
In essence, yes, exactly. It lists rivers, it gives hints about their courses, how they relate to each other geographically.
Okay.
And actually, before we get into the rivers themselves, there's another common idea we should probably clarify. It sometimes comes up when discussing ancient texts.
What's that?
The notion that the Vedas were purely an oral tradition, that they were never written down.
Ah, right. I've heard that.
And while the oral transmission of the Vedas is absolutely true and incredibly important for millennia, the Rig Veda was indeed written down on materials like palm leaves, for instance, and meticulously preserved over generations. Its sacred status doesn't mean it didn't also exist as a physical document.
That's a really important distinction. So it's both a sacred text passed down through recitation and a historical artifact we can study.
Precisely.
All right, so with those common misunderstandings addressed, let's finally immerse ourselves in the Nadisukta. What geographical insights does it offer?
Okay. So the hymn opens by naming a significant sequence of rivers. We hear about the Ganga, the Yamuna, the Sutudri, which we know today as the Sutlej,
Like the Sutlej.
the Purushni, which is now called the Ravi, and then the Saraswati. It continues by mentioning the Asikni, that's the ancient name of the Chenab,
Chenab, okay.
the Vitasta, or Helam, the Marudvrda, the Arjakiya, and the Susoma.
That's quite a list just to start with. And you mentioned it also gives us clues about their paths or routes.
Yes, exactly. Later verses mention a different set of rivers, and these seem to indicate a movement, maybe westward, a flow towards particular regions.
Yeah.
These include the Tratsama, likely the Gilgit River today, the Rasa, the Anitaba, the Kuba, which corresponds to the Kabul River.
Kabul, right.
The Sindhu, the Indus itself, and the Mahatnu, eventually leading us towards the Krumu, the modern Karam River, and the Gomati, or Gomal.
So it's not just a random jumble of names. It sounds like these verses are tracing connections, almost like an ancient river itinerary.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. We get not only the names of key rivers, but also a sense of their geographical relationships, almost like a network of waterways that defined that ancient landscape. And when we look at the Rig Veda as a whole, not just this one hymn, the sheer number of times certain rivers are mentioned, Well, that provides even more valuable information about their significance back then.
Okay, let's talk about that frequency. Which rivers get the most mentions? Who are the headliners here in the Rig Veda?
Well, the Saraswati is by far the most frequently mentioned river. It appears around 72 times.
72. Wow.
Yeah. It really underscores its paramount importance during the Rig Vedic period. The Sindhu, the Indus, comes in second, mentioned over 50 times.
Still a lot.
Definitely. Then we have the Purushni, the Ravi, and the Rasa, each appearing about 6 times.
Okay.
And the other rivers we've discussed, the Yamuna, Sutudri, Asikni, Arjika, Susoma, Kupa, Krumu, Gomati, Ganga, Vitasta, Mardrudha, and a few others like Drishadvaki, Susu, Suya, Mahatnu. They're mentioned much less frequently, usually just once or twice.
That huge difference in frequency is really striking, isn't it? 72 versus 1 or 2 mentions.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the relative importance of these rivers to the people living at that time.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Today, in modern Hinduism, the Ganga and Yamuna rivers hold immense religious significance. I mean, they're central.
Absolutely central, yeah.
But when we look back at the Rig Veda, the clear focus is on the Saraswati and the Sindhu. The Ganga, remarkably, it's mentioned only a single time in the entire Rig Veda.
Only once. That's a massive shift in their perceived importance over time. What could possibly explain that? Maybe changes in river courses, or perhaps the rise of new centers of population further east.
Those are certainly possibilities to consider, yeah. The primary status of the Saraswati in the Rig Veda strongly suggests that the religious and cultural landscape during that era was quite different from what we see developing later. The antiquity of the Rig Veda seems deeply, deeply connected to the prominence of the Saraswati River.
So the people of the Rig Vedic period clearly held the Saraswati in incredibly high regard. Just how high was this reverence? Can we gauge that?
Oh, definitely. One of the hymns states it very clearly, very powerfully. It says, Saraswati, you are the best of all mothers, best of all rivers, and best of all gods.
Wow. Best of all gods. That's an extraordinary statement about a river.
It truly highlights the deep connection the Rigvedic people had with nature, doesn't it? Rivers weren't just, sources of water. They were seen as divine. They embodied nurturing, motherly qualities. And that's a concept that, as you know, continues in Hinduism, even now with rivers like the Ganga. But this particular verse emphasizes the profound, almost supreme importance of the Saraswati in their lives and their worldview back then.
So beyond this powerful spiritual connection, the Rig Veda also provides a physical description of the Saraswati, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of river are we actually talking about based on the text?
Yes, and it's quite a vivid portrayal. One verse in particular, it's in the 7th mandala, describes her as glorious and roaring loudly.
Roaring loudly. Okay.
It states that she came together with the rivers, which suggests a confluence of many tributaries feeding into her. It calls her the mother of floods, the 7th river, and also the mother of Sindhu.
Hold on, the mother of Sindhu, the mother of the Indus.
Exactly, that's what the text says. Sindhu Mata, it continues. With abundant milk and pure streams, she flowed strong and full, overflowing with the power of her own waters.
Mother of floods roaring loudly, mother of Sindhu. I mean, that paints a picture of a truly immense and powerful river system, not some small stream.
Exactly. The description suggests a river of significant scale, clearly prone to flooding, and fed by a large network of smaller rivers. And crucially, as you just picked up on, the Rig Veda identifies Saraswati as Sindhu Mata, the mother of the Sindhu, the Indus.
Right.
This implies a completely different geographical relationship than we see today. It suggests that, at least in the Rig Vedic period, the Indus was actually considered a tributary of the much larger Saraswati.
That's a fascinating reversal of the modern understanding of these river systems. Mind-blowing, actually. And what about abundant milk and pure streams? Is that meant literally?
Probably not literally milk, no, but it's beautiful and evocative poetic language, isn't it?
Yeah.
Abundant milk likely refers to the life-giving nourishment of fresh water, essential for agriculture, for survival, and pure streams could allude to the clear waters, maybe even the white foamy appearance of a strong, powerful, overflowing river.
Makes sense. Beyond these descriptive terms, were there any other significant titles or epithets associated with the Saraswati in the Rig Veda?
Yes, there were. One very notable epithet is Vitrahantri.
Vitrahantri.
Meaning slayer of Vritra. Vritra is a major demon, or asura, in Rigvedic mythology, often associated with drought and obstruction holding back the waters.
Ah. Okay.
So this title suggests that Saraswati was also seen as a powerful, even warrior-like goddess who overcomes obstacles, who breaks the barriers holding back prosperity.
That's quite different from her more contemporary association primarily with knowledge, music, and wisdom, isn't it?
Very different. It shows a different facet in the earliest texts. There are also other geographical epithets used for her, like Saptatu and Nadihitama, which further emphasize her preeminence among rivers. Nadihitama means best of rivers.
So from a mighty roaring river and the source of the Indus to a warrior goddess and the best of rivers, the Saraswati clearly occupied an absolutely central position.
Undeniably.
What about the Sindhu itself, the Indus? How is it depicted if it's the daughter in this context?
Well, the Sindhu, while perhaps seen as secondary to Saraswati in that specific maternal metaphor, is also portrayed with very powerful imagery. It's described with both masculine and feminine attributes.
Oh, interesting. Both.
Yes, reflecting its dual nature as both a powerful, potentially destructive force and a life-sustaining source. We see it described as a warrior king, a leading bull of armies, roaring with strength, decidedly masculine imagery, conveying dominance and power.
A river as a warrior king. That's a compelling image of its importance and force.
It is indeed. But at the same time, the Sindhu is likened to a beautiful horse flowing gracefully, and it's grouped with rivers described as milk-giving mothers, even called a nurturing mother itself.
Oh, okay.
So it embodies both that raw strength and grace, incredible power, and the gentle provision of sustenance.
That duality really emphasizes its crucial role for the people who lived along its banks and completely depended on it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And there are specific epithets for the Sindhu as well. One particularly interesting one is Rajayuta,
Raju?
which translates roughly to, like, a king in battle.
Huh.
It's a fascinating connection, almost a historical echo, when you think about the modern-day significance of the Indus River and, agreements like the Indus Waters Treaty between India and Pakistan. That river remains a powerful entity.
A very potent connection, yeah.
And the Indus Valley civilization, of course, flourished along this very river. The Rig Veda offers these detailed geographical descriptions of it as it existed or was perceived in that ancient era. Ultimately, the Sindhu was clearly the second most important river in the Rig Vedic period after Saraswati.
So we've talked a lot about the Saraswati and the Sindhu. What about those other rivers mentioned in the Rig Veda? Where can we locate them on a present-day map? Are they still around?
Many of them are, yes, and still flow within the Indian subcontinent.
Mhm.
The Sindhu, as we know, is the Indus, flowing through Tibet, India, and Pakistan.
Right.
The Vitasta is the Shalom, also in India and Pakistan. The Sikni is the Chenab, which is also known as Chandrabhaga in later Puranic texts, and it flows through both countries as well. The Purushni is the Ravi, and the name Ravi itself actually has its origins in its Puranic name, Rajaswati. It, too, flows through India and Pakistan. The Sutudri is the Sutlej, called Shatadru in the Mahabharata, and it crosses the India-Pakistan border. And the Vipas of the Rig Veda is the bees. That remains within India and is known as Vipasha in the Mahabharata.
It's remarkable how these ancient names have evolved but are still recognizable in the names we use today. And those 5 rivers you just mentioned, besides the Sindhu, the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Sutlej, and Bees, hang on, those are the very rivers of Punjab, the land of 5 rivers we learn about in history.
Exactly. That's precisely it. The geographical core is right there in the Rig Veda.
Amazing.
And of course, the Ganga and Yamuna, while, as we said, less prominent in the Rig Veda compared to Saraswati and Sindhu, are also Rig Vedic rivers located within modern Prat. But the geographical scope of the Rig Veda actually extends even beyond present-day India.
That's right. You mentioned some earlier. Some of the Rig Vedic rivers are now located in other countries in the region, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. The Kuba, as we discussed, is pretty clearly the Kabul River flowing through Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Right.
And interestingly, the city of Kabul itself is believed to take its name from this ancient river.
Wow, okay.
The Krumu is the Kuram River, located in Pakistan, and again, its modern name is clearly derived from its Rig Vedic form. The Gomati of the Rig Veda is likely the Gomal River, which also flows through Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
The Tritsama is probably the Gilgit River, flowing through the Gilgit-Baltistan region of Pakistan. And the name of the region itself seems to have linguistic roots in that ancient river name.
Fascinating links.
We also have the Suvastu, which is identified as the Swat River in Pakistan, and the Kusapa, known today as the Kunar River in Afghanistan.
So the Rig Veda isn't just a record of ancient India in isolation. It holds these deep geographical connections to what are now Afghanistan and Pakistan. That really highlights the historical and, cultural interconnectedness of this entire region back then.
It absolutely does. It paints a picture of a much broader Rig Vedic world. And this, inevitably, brings us back to the Saraswati and the ongoing discussion, sometimes quite contentious, surrounding its existence and its eventual disappearance.
The mythical river narrative, right?
Oh.
It always seemed, well, contradictory given how frequently and powerfully it's depicted in the Rig Veda itself.
It is a persistent narrative, yeah. And as the textual evidence we've discussed, and also emerging geological evidence suggests, it seems to be a product either of perhaps a lack of complete understanding historically, or maybe more significantly, sometimes a deliberate attempt to downplay the historical continuity of Bharat.
Oh.
The Rig Veda, as we've established, describes the Saraswati not as some trickle, but as a substantial river, the mother of all floods, with a whole network of tributaries feeding into it.
Right.
Now consider this logical point. If, for the sake of argument, the Rig Veda was composed around 1500 BCE by groups migrating from elsewhere, as some older theories propose.
The Aryan invasion migration theory context.
Exactly. Then a river depicted so grandly should have been flowing in that manner around 1500 BCE for them to describe it that way.
Makes sense. You describe what you see.
But geological findings increasingly indicate that the Saraswati River had largely ceased to be a major, perennial, Himalayan-fed river by that time. Evidence suggests significant drying happened much, much earlier.
So the timeline doesn't quite align if you hold on to that 1500 BCE date too rigidly, especially for a river of that described magnitude.
Precisely. The description seems to fit an earlier period better. And as we mentioned earlier, Max Mueller himself revised his initial dating, recognizing its speculative nature.
Right.
The continued insistence, sometimes on 1500 BCE, often seems to serve particular ideological viewpoints, rather than being based on the full body of available evidence, textual and geological.
Okay.
The reality is the Saraswati isn't likely a myth. Its former tributaries, many of them, continue to exist as smaller rivers or paleo channels today. It really begs the question, how could the mother of these very real rivers be purely a figment of imagination?
Yeah, that doesn't add it.
The Rig Veda paints a picture of a very real, very large river that originated in the Himalayas and flowed across northwestern Bharat.
It's almost like saying a major ancient highway never existed, even though you can still find sections of its old route and see the towns it used to connect. The evidence of its tributaries is like finding those old road segments.
That's a very apt analogy, yes. The Rig Veda, when we analyze its geographical content, provides us with this picture of a real and interconnected landscape. It's a form of live history, in a sense.
Live history, I like that.
Where many of the rivers it celebrates, the Sindhu, Yamuna, Ganga, Purushni, Ravi, and numerous others, are not just symbolic names and hymns. They are tangible rivers that continue to shape the subcontinent today. While some rivers might certainly have altered their courses or even disappeared over the vast stretches of millennia, the contested status of the Saraswati remains a really key element in understanding our ancient past accurately.
So, to kind of bring it all together, this deep dive into the Rig Veda reveals it to be much more than just a collection of ancient hymns. It's actually a detailed geographical record, a memory map of the ancient Indian subcontinent.
Absolutely. It highlights the profound importance of rivers like the Saraswati and Sindhu in that specific era, providing these vivid descriptions and even suggesting their geographical relationships in a way that challenges our modern views sometimes.
Right.
And it connects the ancient landscapes depicted in its verses to the present-day reality of rivers flowing across India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, demonstrating a long, shared, and very deep history across the region.
And it really challenges that simplistic notion of the Saraswati as merely a mythical river, doesn't it? Especially when we consider the immense geological timescales involved with the Himalayas and the sheer scale of the river system, described so clearly in the text.
It certainly does, and it encourages us, I think, to look deeper, to synthesize the textual evidence with the scientific findings.
So for you, the listener, maybe consider this. How does this geographical understanding from the Rig Veda reshape your perception of ancient history and the interconnectedness of this whole region? Perhaps it sparks you to investigate the geological research on the Saraswati's course and its drying up, or maybe to explore the more recent history tied to these rivers, like the Indus Waters Treaty. It's all part of a much larger and frankly incredibly compelling story.